guys. Welcome to Enneanerds. My name is Bethany and I'm a type 5.
And my name is Grace and I'm a type 7. Here at Enneanerds, we like to look at the Enneagram through kind of a fun and quirky way. So I hope that you have fun with this episode.
So today we're digging into something a little deep and I'm really excited about it because I like to be deep. And so we're going to talk about kind of like the gut reactions of the various triads. And so if you're unfamiliar, real quick, there are 3 different gut reactions, or I might refer to them as like trauma responses. I feel like that's more of like the therapy type of word that goes with this. And so there is the fear triad, which Grace and I are both in. There is the anger triad, which we don't have represented here, but both of these lovely people are married to anger people. And then we also have the shame or guilt triad. And I specifically invited my friend Katie here, who's going to introduce herself in a second, because she is in the shame triad. And I want to talk about kind of what that is, what that means, because I feel like it's such an abstract term and it's hard for us to like wrap our heads around it. So Katie, why don't you tell us about yourself, your type, how did you get to come or get to know the Enneagram, all of that?
Sure. Hi, guys. So excited to be here. I am a 2-wing 1, otherwise known as the companion. So a little bit about that type is I'm really, really good at being friends with people. I'm good at empathizing with them and taking on their feelings and their needs. I'm not so great about doing that for myself. Sometimes I put others before myself to the burden of myself, or I overcommit to things. But really I feel like just being really in tune with other people and their needs. I was first introduced to the Enneagram through a book called The Road Back to You that a friend introduced me to. And then I later read The Road Back to Us, which is like a relationship Enneagram book that I read with my partner. And so that's really like what started my journey with the Enneagram. And then I got closer into it. And then when I became friends with Bethany, I started talking about it a lot more. And I really feel like Bethany has taught me most of what I know about the Enneagram now, or like listening to the Enneanerds podcast. So excited to be here.
We're really excited for you to be here. And I'm so excited that you just like flattered me because it's awesome. You just appeal to my intelligence. So we actually, Grace and I have this similar story of like The Road Back to You. That's the book that we promote the most on this show because I feel like it's like, what's the word? Like it knows your deepest, darkest fears and secrets and exposes all of them. So if that's what you're looking for, read The Road Back to You because it'll do that for sure. Mm-hmm. So you're a 2-wing 1, and just the 2 by itself is called the helper. And so can you like that label, the helper? First of all, we have a question. Grace and I always ask this. How do you feel about labels?
I like them in a sense of I like rationalizing things with labels. Like when other people like subscribe to labels, it's easier to understand them. But sometimes there's like a little part of me that's like, I'm not that person. Like I have to rebel against this label. So I guess I'm kind of yin and yang with it. Like I like it, but it's also upsetting some ways.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I was just curious. Grace and I are both fine with labels, and so I just wanted to know how you felt about them. So the 2 is the helper, and the 2's gut reaction is shame, or the like trauma response is shame, and so for me that means like whenever something surprising happens or maybe something negative happens, you automatically feel shame and you feel guilt. Correct?
Yes, absolutely.
So how has that played out in your life?
So I think for me, it started like very early on. Like obviously everything connects back to childhood, right? Like everything that we do as adults connects back to childhood. And I think that like being parentified at a young age and everything being my responsibility, like for my younger sibling and everything in our home, I felt like it was all my responsibility. And I carried that into adulthood, and that plays out in, if somebody I know is having a bad day, I feel like it's my fault. Like if somebody is, grumpy with me or short with me, it's obviously something that I did. It's not them having a bad day. It's something that I did to cause this reaction for them. And I think that's a big thing for 2s because we want to be helpers, right? And so when we feel like somebody is upset, we automatically want to fix the situation. And it also manifests itself in hiding things. So a big trauma response for me was I wanted to avoid the feeling of shame and guilt. So I would hide things when I felt like I messed up. And that would spiral into lying and having to keep up with those lies. And it was just a really difficult path to manage for myself.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Thank you for sharing that and being so honest.
Sorry, that was a lot.
It's amazing. No, I really appreciate it. So, Grace, I'm going to ask you the same question because you're on the spotlight too. How has fear played out in your life?
First off, the Enneagram is so interesting because everything that you just said, Katie, like, I don't relate to it really at all. Like, it's so different how, like, it's fascinating. For me with fear, oh my gosh, like the worst things that have happened in my life, I have literally run away. Like moved across the country or across the world to get away from my problems. I will run away from them. And it's not even like a fear of conflict thing, because that's like totally different, but it's just like situational. I want to take myself out of the place and go to my happy place, go as far away as possible. So I have literally moved away to escape things before. I'm not proud of it, but it's true.
Wow. Interesting. I remember when you left me and that hurt so much. No, I'm just kidding. I've moved past it. It's fine. And then of course I want to, speculate wildly about the anger triad. And so I'm going to ask you guys, since you're married to people who are in the anger triad, how do you think that plays out in their lives?
Well, I know with my husband is a 9 and also my mom is a 9.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because my husband is still a relatively young man and my mom is a mature woman, I think she's a really good example of where hopefully the anger triad can get to eventually. Because she's just very calm and mature about things. Like she just doesn't really get angry very much anymore. If she does, she buries it, but deals with it too. She's great. But my husband, he's definitely not like a super angry person who like throws things around or anything like that. But he like suppresses things. Hopefully, I don't know if he's going to listen to this. He's going to get angry about that. Until like it bubbles over, and then he's just like so frustrated and he wants to have nothing to do with anyone ever again. Or whoever upset him, like he's just done with them. Whereas I like agonize over things for like years. He's like, he cuts someone off and he's done. And like, so don't bother my husband or he will literally cut you off. So, but again, he's not like throwing things around, but like it builds up so much and then he's just done. So that's how he deals.
Yeah. I have a very similar situation with my partner where he'll hold things in, and he's gotten so much better about this because like he's been going to therapy for years now, and like that's something that he's been working on personally. But he will hold on to things and then lash out, and I'll be like, where is this coming from? And he'll be like, 6 months ago you said this. And I'm like, I don't remember what I had for breakfast, like this. But it's also been very triggering as a 2 because my gut reaction is guilt and shame. And so when he gets very upset and very angry, it's taken a lot for me to not immediately go, oh my goodness, this is my fault. I did this. And so it's been interesting to see how both of our types work together in our relationship, and how like we can also kind of work against each other because of our gut reactions.
That's so interesting to me because like I don't deal with anger a lot, in that sense, but I do relate to Brandon and the whole like cutting people off. Like I will cut somebody out so fast. But it's not, I don't know if that's from a place of anger or if it's just from like a place of fear of like, I'm afraid you're going to hurt me again. And so I want you to have nothing to do with you. And so it's interesting because it's like same behavior, but different motivations. And so like with the different, anyways, it's so interesting to me. Okay. Anyways, moving on. So Since you've learned your gut reaction or your trauma response, how have you changed your behavior since you've learned about it?
I can go first. Okay. So, for me, it took years, and I mean years of therapy, y'all. Like so much therapy, so much time and money on a couch. But really, truly, I had to get to a point where I didn't look at every situation and say, like, this is me, this is my fault, this is what I've done. Um, and I realized that I didn't have to own other people's stuff. Like
Mm,
my therapist literally sat me down and was like, you do not own their struggles.
mm,
And I had to really sit in that. And I had to practice, like I do a lot of meditation, I do a lot of yoga. And then there's this thing where they say, sit in that feeling
mhm,
and really resonate with that feeling. And I've had to learn how to sit in those vulnerable, uncomfortable moments where it would be so much easier to lie and hide things.
mm,
It'd be so much easier, but I know that that's not going to solve anything, right? And I want to solve the problems. I don't want to keep having the same problems. And it took me getting to a place where I really damaged my relationship with my partner because of hiding things,
mm,
and going to therapy and realizing this is not how I want to live, to get to a place now where I can be honest and
mm.
not be shameful and guilt ridden all the time.
Wow. So recognizing your behavior and
Yeah.
like literally telling yourself, I'm not going to do that. Like I'm not going to hide things. I'm not going, I'm not going to live in that shame, but I will feel it and sit in it and acknowledge the feeling is what you're saying.
Yeah. Like acknowledging the feeling of, I want to hide right now.
Mm-hmm.
I want to get away from this really uncomfortable feeling, and kind of doing this internal dialogue of, okay, what am I feeling? Where am I feeling it? Why am I feeling this? And then oftentimes when I meditate on that, it'll bring me to another situation in the past, usually childhood, right? And it'll be like, oh, I did this when I was a kid, or something similar happened to me when I was a child, and I was reprimanded for it, and I was told that it was my fault. And so that's why I'm connecting these two things now.
Mm. Very interesting. Go ahead, Grace.
I just feel like I just had therapy.
I know.
That was really beautiful said. This is the problem. Whenever we have guests, I just like zone in so much on what you guys are saying, and I just like, woo! So what I'm about to say is not going to be that profound. I have not been to therapy. I just went into a deep depression. So for me, for sevens, a lot of sevens, our reaction in the fear is to avoid all of our bad feelings. And so back in my 20s, I got over that. I was able to feel my feelings, but then I just stayed in those sad feelings for too long. And my struggle was learning to get out of that and get back to like not just living in constant fear, living in that headspace. So I'm still learning that. I'm still working through it. It has gotten much better. But I think for me, it just takes a lot of time. And because sevens go to 1 in stress, and ones are very self-critical. So I'm constantly, I related to what you were saying, Katie, about how you blame yourself for everything. So I do feel like I do that. I'm really, really self-critical when I'm in stress. And so I'm constantly thinking like, I ruined everything. I wish I could go back in time and fix this. So learning how to get out of that has been my journey. And as I said, I'm still in that journey. So I don't really have a resolution for it quite yet. But
I think the resolution is sitting in the feeling as and acknowledging,
but not staying there. That's the problem.
Not saying that. Yeah.
I was gonna say that's something that I talked about in therapy. You're going to hear me say that a
This is the
lot.
whole point that I invited you, is because you've been to therapy and we haven't. And so we just wanted to have somebody with that has therapy experience.
Let me put y'all in some game. No, but something that I learned was you sit in the feeling, you honor that feeling, and then you release that feeling. Because, like you said, you don't want to stay angry or sad or worried. Like, you want to be able to release it and move on. And it's a practice that you have to continually practice doing.
That's really good. And I feel like I'm better at that now than I have been in the past. I think a younger version of me, when I would feel these overwhelming feelings of anxiety or fear, I would look for a distraction. And so I guess it's a way of running from it, is like, oh, well, let me just dive into this topic and learn everything I can about this topic and distract myself from how I'm feeling. And then I won't have to think about these negative feelings that I'm having. And so I have become expert in like all kinds of things for a brief amount of time. I lose the information. Like, I don't hold on to it, but like for a brief amount of time, because I don't necessarily want to deal with the feeling. But I will say that, y'all both know this. And I don't know if I've said this on the podcast, but a year and a half ago, my mom died. And so that traumatic event forced me to like really dig in to how I was feeling and deal with it, because no one else is going to deal with it for me. Like, I'm going to have to do the work. And so since then, I think I've allowed myself, like, I've given myself permission to feel the feelings, because I don't know. I always said that, like, I would realize I was upset about something like 3 days later after it happened, because I wouldn't process in the moment. I would just be like, that was weird, and move right along. And then 3 days later realized I was upset about it. But when you have an event like a loved one passing away, there's no like, like, you have to deal with that. Grief is awful. And Katie, I know you know about grief as well. Like, it's terrible, and it's something you hold on to for the rest of your life. And so dealing with grief has like been the game changer for me, of like, I have to acknowledge how I'm feeling, and I have to sit in it for a little bit, and then hopefully move right out of it. And so anyways, I don't know if you want to talk about your grief a little bit, Katie, but I feel like it's such a good topic to talk about. And so if you're open to it, we can. If not, then we can move right along.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so when I was about 10 years old, my older brother passed away suddenly. And it was a big shock to my family, obviously. And my parents ended up getting divorced like 2 years later. So most couples who lose a child don't stay together. The grief is too dramatic for them. And this was around the time I was like 12, 13 when this happened. And so this is around that time when I was parentified and I was taking care of my younger brother and taking care of myself because my parents were dealing with their own grief. Mm-hmm. And so I grieved as a child, and then I kind of put it away for a while because I was in survival mode. And then it hit me when I was older. I want to say like 20. So I had my first child when I was 20 years old. And it was right around that time that the grief kind of came back because postpartum hormones and just a very difficult season of life. And I wanted my brother there. Like I missed my brother, and I had wanted him to be a part of my life for this huge life event. And, why wasn't he there? He should be here for me. And so I got to deal with that as an adult, as a new mom. So that was really fun. Mm-hmm. But it's something that, again, I go back to therapy, thank goodness. But I had to learn how to not move on with my life, but incorporate my grief into my life, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. I heard a really good analogy recently. Like, grief is like butter. At first, it's like really hard and lumpy, and it doesn't fit in your dough, but you keep kneading it and you keep pushing it down. and you keep working it into your life. And then eventually all the sweet things in your life melt in with this grief, and you have this beautiful life that you've created for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I deal with my grief by honoring my brother, by speaking about him with my children. And I have pictures of him up in my home, and I celebrate his birthday. And it does, like you were saying, like grief pushes you to feel those feelings, and there's nowhere for you to hide. It really takes those spaces away from you and makes you uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I grew so much as a person because of not having those spaces to hide. Like
Mm-hmm.
I had to deal with what I was going through. And it just got to a point where you have to be able to keep going. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's one of those things where it's uncomfortable growth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For sure. I 100% relate. I feel like I am the most emotionally mature I've ever been in my life, and I owe it to the grief that I've experienced in the year and a half that I've had it. And that, like, I know that grief is not going to get smaller. I guess it gets smaller, but it's like, it's never going to go away. Like
Yeah.
it's always going to be there. There's always going to be moments where I'm going to miss my mom, of course, and so and it hits you in the wildest like times too. You never know when it's going to pop up. Anyways, I wanted to bring up grief because I feel like it is a trauma, like it's a traumatic thing that happens. And so do you think that your grief has like amplified your shame in any kind of way? Do you feel like that's connected?
I feel like it is, because it's those major emotions. I feel like all of your major emotions are tethered to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that in my grief and in my sadness, being self-critical, like we were talking about, Grace, like being self-critical was so toxic and so bad for me. And so I would hide, and I would feel guilty about falling short of things. Like I would have this ideal of what I was supposed to be. And if I fell short of those things, then I would feel guilty and shameful. And like I wasn't mothering my children right, or I wasn't losing enough weight, or I couldn't go do these things with my friends because I didn't have the money to go do it right then.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would hide these things to get away from feeling shameful in these moments. And so I think that, yeah, I think that they do. Sorry, that was a lot, but
No, I love
I
it.
think, I think that they absolutely are connected, because it's these emotional trigger points where you have to make these choices, right, of how you're going to deal with your emotions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, Grace, do you think that there's any strong emotion that's tied to your fear that amplifies it?
That's a good question.
That wasn't on our prepared list. I'm so sorry.
No. Can you repeat the question?
I was just thinking, like, is there any, because like grief has, expanded our, my feelings of fear, her feelings of shame. Is there an emotion, since you haven't experienced grief necessarily like we have, is there another emotion that has affected you and it amplified your fear?
I mean, I as a child, going back to childhood, I was an extremely, extremely fearful child. Like, talk to my mom. Oh my gosh, I made her life a nightmare because I was scared of literally everything. So I feel like fear in that way is a really powerful emotion for me. And I know we're talking about fear is our actual,
Right.
response. But as I've gotten older, I have really made it a goal of mine to face fears and put myself in uncomfortable places. But fear is such a trigger for me, whether it's, making a phone call or moving to the other side of the world or whatever it is, becoming a mom, whatever. Fear is so powerful for me. And I'm constantly scared things are going to happen. I think I swing into my wing 6 and prepare for the worst all the time. So that would be my answer to that. But that was a very good question. And I don't have a great answer for you.
No, it's fine. I'm just so curious about like our emotions and how they affect us. And I feel like every number, not even different triads, every number has a different reaction to their core fears or core emotion or whatever they're feeling. And so I'm fascinated and I want to know everything. So anyways, moving on. So have you had any like epiphanies about your gut reaction? And so, Katie, if you want to go first, like any epiphanies about like the shame or what it means or any of that in your therapy, any epiphanies, please let me know.
Yeah, epiphanies are great. So I feel like I think the biggest epiphany for me was just that I don't have to own other people's emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't have to own their feelings. They're not mine, and they have really nothing to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because I mean, Bethany's seen this before. I will literally divert whatever I'm doing to go help somebody, to go do something for someone, and it sounds very self-righteous, but it's true, because it's a way for me to feel good about myself, is to help others. And that really rears its head when you're talking about the guilt and the shame, because then you feel like you're responsible for their happiness, and you're responsible for um making whatever situation they're in easier for them, when in
Mm-hmm.
reality that's not your job. It's not what you need to be doing. That's may not be even how they need to be helped. Some people just want you to listen to them. They don't need you to try to fix their problems, right? So I think the biggest epiphany for me was just like, I'm not a bad person if I don't overextend myself to help somebody. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's not mine. I don't need to claim it. I have enough of my own, and that's okay.
Yeah. You just said something that I related to. Shoot, the thought just went out of my brain. I don't remember what it was, but something about the responsibility. Oh, it's not your job to fix it. It's I also want to fix all the things, and we're not even the same number. But I see like it's like I see somebody struggling, and I want to give them the answer. I'm like, I know the answer. I can tell you, and it's like, but they don't even want to know the answer. Like they're not willing to like accept that, right? And so it's like my responsibility to fix it and feel better about myself for fixing their problem, you know? And for me, it manifests in a way of like, well, I have the knowledge. And so I will help you because I have the knowledge. Like I give a lot of like unsolicited advice. I know I do. It's like one of the things about me. It's just like what I say first that comes out of my mouth. And I need to make sure I'm asking like, do you want to hear this advice or do you just want to like vent? Because I can just listen, you know? I think that's a good technique or tool there of like, ask the question, do they want help or do you just need to listen? And so I think that might help a little bit. Um, Grace, have you had any epiphanies about fear?
So when you sent me these questions, I thought these questions were only for Katie. So I didn't think about any answer for any of these. So
You know me you should know I'm going to put you on the spot. Like, you know better.
well, here we go. I think my main epiphany that I've had is I said in childhood, I was extremely fearful. And then as like 20 something I faced a lot of fears. I did a lot of, exciting things, and my life was vastly better. Like
Mm-hmm.
I,
Mm-hmm.
not that I look back at my childhood, like it was a terrible childhood, but like I missed out on a lot of opportunities because I was so scared and filled with fear. Whereas I made up for that so much in my early 20s and mid 20s. But then I feel like in the last couple of years, I've kind of reverted back to that a little bit in ways. Like I'm kind of being consumed by the fear in certain aspects of my life. And so I think my epiphany that I just have to keep telling myself is that fear does not serve you at all.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
make your life better. It's not even like a fight or flight survival kind of a thing. It's just fear for no good reason is what I deal with. And it really doesn't make my life better. And so facing those fears or dealing with those emotions it makes my life better. And so
Mm-hmm.
I just have to keep reminding myself because I feel myself kind of drifting back to that
Mm-hmm.
little fearful girl
Mm.
in the last couple of years.
And I think for me, I have a little bit different of epiphany is fear is temporary.
Mm.
It's not forever, and it's so easy when you get caught up in fear to think worst case scenario, the worst thing is happening to me. I will never be able to come back from this. And you go to all of these like just outrageous thoughts and statements and these intrusive thoughts too. And I just have to remind myself, this is temporary. I will feel better tomorrow. Like just telling myself, like this is not the end all be all. Cause I feel like that's a trick that Satan uses of like I'm gonna get in your head and make you think this is the worst thing in the entire world, especially when it comes to fear. And so telling myself this is all temporary, it doesn't really matter in the end. It kind of like puts things into perspective for me. And then I also asked my sister this question because she's actually in the anger triad. She's a 9 too. And I asked her about any epiphanies that she has about like gut reactions and stuff. And she said that she's realized that sometimes our gut reactions are there to help us. And that if we are a healthy version of ourselves, then we can use our gut reaction to help us and like propel us forward. Because she's like, there's such a thing as like a healthy fear. You have a healthy fear of snakes, right? You're not going to go get into a snake pit, like, because the opposite of like having a healthy fear is just being reckless, and so you have this logic that's there for you to help you not be reckless all the time, and like sometimes shame can help you in certain aspects. It helps humble yourself to where you're not getting all high and mighty on what you do. So I thought that was kind of interesting of her like saying like sometimes like a reaction can actually be helpful for you. It's not necessarily all negative all the time. And I was like, oh, you're so smart. I tried to have her on, but she couldn't come. And so then we would have had two Katies. It would have been confusing. And so, but anyways.
Only one Katie.
Only one Katie. So my last question is more so for Katie. Grace, you can answer if you would like. I'll give you some time to think about it. How has the Enneagram helped you in life? I just love this question because I think it's such a great tool to have in life.
So I think the Enneagram helped me just to begin with as a way to understand myself. I'm very into these different like categories we put ourselves in as people. And I feel like the Enneagram is a great example of those like universal truths for people.
Mm-hmm.
And it also helped me a lot in my relationship because once I was able to say like, oh, this is who you are, these are the things that trigger you, these are your weak points, I was able to understand like how we could come together. Like The Road Back to Us was really a great book for me, because it helped me understand like it's almost like love languages in a way of like you're not speaking in a way that I understand you,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, he's in the anger triad, I'm in the shame triad, and the way that we would communicate would trigger each other. And I really had to like go back and refocus and say, okay, how am I able to speak to you in a way that you understand me so we can come together and fix this problem? So it was really beneficial for me in that way. And now I just really enjoy like talking to Bethany about it and like the people that we meet and being like, oh, they're a 5, they're a 7. Like these are the things that we know about them because I'm a little bit nosy. And so I want to know more about them as a person. So I really like it just as a tool of understanding people. Because I like to understand people and I like to figure people out.
100% agree with you. 100%. Grace, any thoughts, questions,
I
concerns?
don't feel like I need to add to that. I think that was great. And I talk about how it helps my life on this podcast all the time. So
this is true.
I'm just going to remain mum for this one.
Okay. Well, that's all my questions. Anybody else have any last thing they want to throw out about their gut reaction or anything?
Yeah, actually. So it came to me as we were talking. I'm sure that y'all are familiar with Brene Brown, the author and researcher. She researches shame. So how Brene Brown became famous is she researches shame. And I read a bunch of her books and watched her TED Talk. And one of the things that she says is that shame kills people because people would, and it's 100% true. And it's so hard hitting, but shame kills people because they would rather hide the truth than be vulnerable in the light. And so I would just encourage other twos and other people in the shame triad to really work on feeling your feelings and not being afraid of whatever the scary situation is, where you feel shameful or guilty, and acknowledging those feelings, because it is a killer and I just want everyone to be okay. So if you can just acknowledge your feelings and be honest and be truthful as much as you can and be vulnerable when it's scary and hard, I promise you it's a better life for you.
Oh, I love that so much. Thank you for sharing. So, you're so open and honest, and I love it so much. So I really appreciate you coming on the show and just like being your true self and showing us what a healthy two looks like. That's like going to therapy and getting help and like just amazing.
Well, thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, I'm going to wrap it up, and I appreciate anybody who's listening out here, and I hope that everybody has a wonderful day and that this helps somebody. So we'll see you next time.